Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting day of masterclasses hosted by the IAPC&M. I'm your host, 𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗂𝗃𝗵, APC, and I'm delighted to be here with you. In recognition of National Stress Awareness Day, we are hosting a special members-only masterclass series designed to help coaches strengthen their own self-care and resilience. This is a masterclass series packed with practical, supportive, and nourishing sessions that put your well-being first. This is your space to pause, reset, and replenish. Our first guest today is Dr. Rodney King, a philosophical coach and founder of coaching 𝗁𝗂𝗶𝗴𝘂. For more than 2 decades, he has taught embodied leadership and presence to leaders and teams at organizations, including Google, Airbnb, Meta, and Singapore Airlines. His first PhD examined mindful embodied leadership, and he's currently completing a second PhD in philosophy at Rhodes University on the modern meeting, crisis, and philosophical praxis. Rodney's work sits where physiology meets conversation. He equips coaches with simple, evidence-informed breath and orienting practices that steady the automatic nervous system, deepen listening, and strengthen rapport. His approach is practical, ethical, and easy to use in real sessions. Rodney's masterclass today explores how automatic nervous system states shape coaching presence, rapport, and outcomes. You will learn simple, evidence-informed breathwork and microsomatic practices to bring the ANS towards balance in session, shifting from threat to safety, and how to use your own nervous system as a co-regulating instrument. Expect brief practice rounds, clear cues for spotting dysregulation, and an open-close session protocol using embodied check-ins. You will leave with tools you can apply immediately to deepen trust, sharpen listening, reduce client overwhelm, and protect your own energy. So without further ado, over to you, Rodney. We're so delighted that you're here with us.
Well, thank you, Elena. I really appreciate the intro. I'm happy to be with everyone. It's kind of always an exciting session to do this. So yeah, as you said, I'm going to keep things pretty simple. And I want to kind of impart some ideas that I found that have really worked for me in my own coaching practice. I just want to preface this just in the beginning, just so everybody understands that if I kind of stumble a little bit, struggle a little bit, I haven't been feeling too great the last week. Not really sure what I'm fighting here. So my throat's a bit rough, but I'm here. And that's the most important thing. So as we said, this session is really looking at the autonomic nervous system and its role, not only with our clients, but also with ourselves. So to make it practical, and it can be quite hard, right? So right now I'm sitting down, I'm behind my desk, I can't really go anywhere. And I'm always a fan of thinking about an embodied approach to coaching. So of course, there's huge value in sitting across somebody, having a conversation. But at times, especially when we have our clients that are extremely stressed out, the thing that is really important is to enable them to regulate their nervous system in that moment in time. It's one way to kind of really open up the discussion, where sometimes when people are definitely in a stress kind of response, they close down, right? As much of us tend to do ourselves. So I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. So I'm kind of going to move on to my first slide. And I want to make it practical. So no death by PowerPoint, right? I know we're all tired of that as well, seeing, all these PowerPoints, but let me get into it. So my first thing that I want to just kind of mention here is, yes, you're going to get some tools, but I really don't want to just add more just for the sake of adding more tools. I really want us to kind of understand how we can deepen our presence. And one of the most easiest ways to do that, honestly, is through looking at the body, our clients' bodies, as a natural intelligence. And even if we just, if you're looking at the image that I have on the screen right now, and you look at the guy in front of you, right? That kind of the way that he's sitting, the way that he's presenting himself, that in itself can already tell you that something's going on here, right? So it is important that we are reading our client's body, how they're holding themselves, because that's an indicator into what's actually going on, right? Because we all do this ourselves. We say one thing, but our body can be saying something completely different. So that's also really crucial, is that the way somebody holds themselves, the way they hold their body tells you a lot. I would say that if I'm looking at this image, clearly this particular individual is struggling in this moment in time with something. It's very clear. And if that's the case, we know for sure that something is going on with the autonomic nervous system. And more than likely, the way that I like to describe it is this particular person is running hot, right? And I'm going to get into it and I'm going to unpack it, because a lot of times when we talk about these things, they can be very, very complicated. And of course, if somebody's watching this and they happen to be a medical doctor, they'll say, well, Rodney, you're oversimplifying it. But it's better to have kind of a simple approach to this and understanding, because that also allows you then to articulate that to your clients when you need to, right? Because once you start getting really complicated with your language and going down all these different medical terms, it gets overwhelming, and it doesn't necessarily get the point across that you're trying to get. The thing is also, it's really difficult to get people to understand why their natural intelligence is incredibly important in order for them to flourish in life. And what tends to let us down is our language. It's hard to explain these things when you're talking about what would be termed somatic processes, because the words are very difficult, because it's a really internal, subjective experience. And exactly that, you have to experience it. You have to have an experience of it in order for you to fully comprehend it, right? So you have that experience of these embodied experiences, and then maybe later on you can articulate it, yourself, and you can identify it and be rational about it. But to try to approach it from a rational perspective straight off the bat can sometimes be very difficult, because it doesn't necessarily make sense to people. So for those on this call, I want to start off by just you yourself doing an internal check. Ask yourself the two questions that are on the slide. What's the tempo of your body right now? What does it feel like? How does it feel internally? A good example of that would be if you kind of feel that your body's internally, it feels like it's vibrating slightly, like there's a vibration. That's a very easy indicator when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, the one part we're going to look at in a second. The sympathetic nervous system is engaged, and potentially it's running hotter than you would like it to be, because that's not a calm state to be in. On the same side of this is that as you enter a session, as you go and you start working with a client, are you arriving with tension? Or are you open? Or do you feel exhausted? That's also going to change that interaction with your client and how you are able to explore what you need to explore in that session. So one of the first practices that I want to do here, and it seems kind of weird, and I've always been one of those people, like when people do these practices on Zoom calls, I always feel like uncomfortable. So I'm sure there's people that feel like that too. But I will do this one just before I start session. So just before I jumped on this call, I did this exact one. And it's really, really easy, and it works really well. And I'm, as we go on in the session, I'm going to explain to you why, but I want you to experience it first, right? So before I kind of give you the lowdown of why this does what it does, I want you to actually experience yourself. Now, you can do it sitting, so you don't have to be standing. I'm kind of locked in my chair here, behind my desk, not really anywhere I can stand up. It would be great if you could do it standing, to be honest. So like before a session, if you have some time, do this for yourself. Just do it standing. Can you get your clients to do it? Absolutely. I'm going to say this again with a caveat. We all have clients that approach things differently. Some people they might feel very uncomfortable doing something like this. So you may have to ease them into it and introduce them to it slowly. Sometimes you just doing it yourself, right, and them seeing it is enough for them to maybe think, okay, maybe I will give that a try. And if they feel under pressure in the session, you should never put your client under pressure, right? If you feel like the tension is there, they're hearing you, but they don't want to do it, say, you know what, I'm going to show you this exercise, but give it a go. Give it a go at home when no one else is around. Just try it out for me a couple of times between now and the next session, and then give me some feedback. Let me know how it went. So it's pretty simple. Basically, what you want to do, where you are right now, you want to shake out. So I'm actually going to take my hands, I'm going to put it on the side of my chair, so it's on the side, and I want to shake out for about 5 to 10 seconds. And as I'm shaking out, I'm trying to shake everything that I can, right? Every part of my body, I'm going to shake out. If you want to do it with your eyes closed, you can do that. But what you want to really also focus on, and this will become really apparent as we move on, is you really want to focus on your breathing, but specifically your out breath. So as I'm shaking, I'm focusing on a long exhale. So I'm exhaling long as I'm shaking my body, right? And I'm trying to get as much of a shake into it. And, do it for a little bit there. And what most people will say, if I ask them, is like, how does that feel? If you were feeling that vibration in your body before that I alluded to earlier, it switches pattern and it goes into what feels almost like slight pins and needles, right? Like a prickly feeling. So if you just do this a couple of times, keep your head going, shake it out, right? Focus on the exhale. Hard to do, obviously, as I'm talking, but that's really what you want to do, right? You want to focus on that and just try that out, right? So just give yourself a couple of moments to do that. Okay, so now as we come back to this moment, ask those questions again, right? The 2 questions we started off with. What's the tempo of your body right now? Has anything changed? Does it feel the same? If you are arriving on this call, maybe when I asked the question the first time, you were, running in from something else, so you were arriving with some tension. Maybe you're feeling exhausted, didn't have a great sleep the night before. Do you feel more open now? Has anything changed for you? And of course, you don't need to tell me that. You can just answer that for yourself. So there's already one really simple practice that really is effective. And Elena's kind of mentioned this, right? She mentioned when she introduced me, she said about simple practices. I'm going to say more about it as we go, but oftentimes it's actually the simple things we do that have the most profound effect, right? We think that, oh, that's way too simple for that to be effective, but in my experience, it is. Now, I'm going to explain to you in a bit why that actually works, what's the reason behind it. But first, before I do that, I kind of want to just touch on this whole idea of the autonomic nervous system and give you really just a really easy way of understanding it. You probably know, but you're going to hear it again, kind of the Cliff Notes version. So something I mentioned earlier, right? So before we ask the first question as a coach, we're already communicating something through posture, tone, and breath, both ways, right? Myself as the coach and the client that I'm working with. What's important here to understand is that the way that I'm communicating, that's also going to affect our relationship, right, with myself and my client. So it's really important that I come into a session as best as I possibly can, attuned to the moment, and have my nervous system, at least as best as I can, balanced out, because that's going to make the difference between this session being a really super amazing session and potentially not. But let's just kind of unpack this idea of the autonomic nervous system. There's a word in there that kind of is really important, auto, meaning automatic. And so when we think about the autonomic nervous system, it's automatic, it's in the background, it's doing what it needs to do as best as it possibly can to keep us in a mode that will be safe. We're always looking for safety. Even our brain is doing that. We now know through neuroscience that our brain is a prediction machine. It's always trying to predict the next thing. Our body's also trying to do that, right? So that's the reason why when we think about our stresses and everything, it's trying to keep us safe actually, but sometimes it can go south, sometimes it can go wrong, right? So if you think about the autonomic nervous system, the easiest way to understand it is to separate it into two parts. On the one side, you have the sympathetic nervous system, and then on the other side, you have the parasympathetic nervous system. So when I think about the sympathetic nervous system, it's kind of an interesting name. You hear that word and you go, sympathetic. But actually, a lot of the times it isn't very sympathetic because the sympathetic nervous system is this idea of the fight, flight, and freeze response. So I've always found this fascinating, right? So I'll give you an example from my own experience when I've been consulting. So I consult for different groups, but one of those happens to be a very well-known airline. And when they asked me to come in and work a specific experience with them, which was essentially how to deal with a disruptive passenger on an aircraft. And the things that they were taught were really, really good. So they were taught the physical components of when things go south, this is how you're going to restrain this passenger. But what was left out of the equation was how they were going to manage themselves in that moment of high stress. So nobody ever talked to these cabin crew about how their body's actually going to show up in that moment in time. And I was always fascinated because I was mostly working with young people in their early 20s that they had never heard of this idea of the autonomic nervous system. If there was one thing they did kind of know sometimes was this idea of the fight, flight, and freeze response. So they were aware slightly of that. But beyond that, it was a kind of a new discussion for them. They'd never heard it before, which is fascinating, right? Because we learn all these things in school, but what we never learn is how to manage ourselves, how to do inner management. And imagine if we were actually taught that from the beginning, how different our lives might have unfolded. I could just think for myself, it would have been very useful to know the things that we're talking about in this session. So the sympathetic nervous system isn't always sympathetic, right? It is designed to, in essence, to keep you safe, to keep you alive. That is your fight and flight response, right? Exactly as it says, if you can't fight what's in front of you, you're going to flee and you're going to get out of there. At worst case, though, when you are highly, highly stressed out, when you're running extremely hot, the worst thing that can happen is you freeze. So this is something that I said to those cabin crews. Like, imagine if it was running so hot, you didn't have any tools, any way to manage yourself in that moment of time, and you froze. That would be like the worst situation, right? I mean, now you completely forget. And that's the thing too. As coaches, when we're working with our clients, if they're in a sympathetic dominant process, they've come in to the session, they are highly stressed out, it's going to be very difficult for you to communicate with them and for them to give you what you want them to give you, right? To expand on what's actually happening. Because one of the things, well, not only one of the things, but a few of the things that happen when you're in a high fight and flight response or running hot is your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that makes decisions, starts switching off. Everything gets shifted over to the emotional side, and you're just in that survival mode all the time. And so our role as coaches is to help our clients come out of that, right? To come back to a place of homeostasis, of balance. So this is really where the parasympathetic nervous system comes in now. Remember, there's two parts, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Parasympathetic nervous system is often referred to as the rest and digest system of your autonomic nervous system. I kind of think of it as the calming side of your nervous system, right? And there's nothing wrong, inherently wrong in the fight and flight response, because depending on the situation, you may need it, right? It's the fuel that gets you through the hard times when you actually have to really move from point A to point B and there are obstacles in the way. You want that to be there. The problem is when it's so extreme, when it's running so hot, then there's negative consequences. And really, that's the thing that I'm trying to convey over to my clients is that, look, it's not that you don't want the sympathetic nervous system to be doing what it should do, but what you do want to do is you want to learn to manage it when it becomes a hindrance, when it becomes an obstacle, when it's getting in your way. And if you're highly stressed out and you suddenly finding yourself unable to think clearly, that's a good example where some intervention is needed, right? This is the moment where some embodied skills would be very, very effective. That would be a really good time now to do that shake, right? To shake out, because that would help you just return back to a baseline. Now, none of these practices would ever get you completely calm and all zen, right? But they at least bring it down enough so that you can now effectively start finding yourself moving into a space where you can actually be better than you were a moment before, right? So your performance starts to improve. So just on that slide, you can see fight and flight, hypervigilance, urgency, tight jaw, right? It's not uncommon when people are highly stressed out and they kind of clench their jaws. Many of us can recognize that. There's that shutdown if it goes too high, so you freeze. There's disassociation. The voice tone starts coming down, low voice. But when you feel safe and connected, you have a calm face, a warm tone, and a flexible body, right? So coming back to my original image where that guy was sitting there, very clearly that's not a flexible body. You can see something's going on, right? So that's an easy way to kind of understand those two aspects of the autonomic nervous system. But what I think is also very powerful here to add is for not only us as coaches, but also this information that when we're talking to our clients is I want you to think about the autonomic nervous system, right, and the brain, our cognition, as two different languages. Okay, so I'll give you an example of what I mean by this. We've all been stressed out. If you think back to the last time you were really stressed out, you probably internally in your cognitive mind, in your thinking mind, were telling yourself to calm down and relax. If you're really honest with yourself, how well did that work? When you're in a high stress situation and you're saying, just calm down, just relax, how well does that work? Whenever I ask a group of people, most people are shaking their heads already. They're like, it doesn't work, right? But it would be important to understand why that is, right? Because we are told in the modern world that, everything's about brain power, right? It's all about cognition. It's all about rationality. So it's all about thinking, and thinking should be able to solve all our problems. Well, why in that moment in time, when I'm feeling highly stressed out, telling myself to calm down is not going to work? So the way that I think about it is exactly as I noted earlier. The brain, my cognition, uses one language where my autonomic nervous system uses a different language. And it can't communicate with each other, right? It just bypasses. It's two people from two different parts of the world with two different languages who cannot understand each other, having a conversation, and it's just like, I don't know what you're saying, right? So then the question is, if the autonomic nervous system has a language of its own, and it's not cognition and it's not thinking, what is that language? Well, that language is an embodied language, right? So coming back to the thing we did in the beginning, where I said, shake it out, the way that I describe that to people is I call it the zebra shake, right? So you know what a zebra, right? And it's a fun way of kind of thinking about it. And it's interesting because I actually saw this a really long time ago on a documentary. So if you watch National Geographic, I'm talking like a very, very long time ago, before I knew even any of this existed. And it was interesting. I'll kind of play it out for you, but nobody in the documentary mentioned this. So there's a scene where a lion is stalking a group of zebra. It marks one zebra that it thinks that's the one I think is potentially the weakest or the closest, and I'm going to go for it. And so off the lion goes. The lion is running after the zebra through the savannah, African savannah. The zebra is doing everything it possibly can not to become the lion's next meal. It's kicking backwards, it's zigzagging, doing everything it needs to do. And in this documentary, it's successful. It successfully evades the lion. Then whoever's doing the photography switches the camera angle now to the zebra at the watering hole, and the zebra is now drinking water. So there's the first clue. That's a good thing, right? That's another thing to take note of, and you would recognize this when you're highly stressed out. Some of the other side effects of being super stressed out with your sympathetic nervous system running hot is your mouth runs dry, your hands get clammy, right? In extreme situations, you could get auditory exclusion where you can't hear anything. Another thing, and we're going to look at that in a second, is all of your focus gets like centralized. Everything is focused to what's in front of you. Because it makes sense if you think about that zebra, who is a mammal like us and also has an autonomic nervous system. All of these things are designed to help the zebra and ourselves survive a high stress situation. But there's a difference there for most of us. The zebra actually had a real predator chasing it, right? Where most of the time, our predator, the thing that's chasing us, is our thoughts. It's all of the stuff that the stories that we're creating in our mind, right? That's the thing that's chasing us. It's not really a real lion, but we're responding the same way because the brain cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a threat that we've created. It responds in a similar way. And that's the reason why that sympathetic nervous system switches on. So back to the zebra at the watering hole. Drinking water makes perfect sense. Its mouth is now dry. It's just escaped from, being the lion's breakfast for that morning. But something else fascinating that's happening as that camera is panning and you look at the zebra and you look at its mane coming down off its head all the way through the back, you'll see the entire zebra is vibrating. It's shaking. It's actually doing this. It's shaking off. Now, the reason it's shaking off comes back to what we started off in the beginning with that exercise, is that when you shake, just like a zebra, it switches on that parasympathetic nervous system. So it goes from a heightened survival state, sympathetic fight, flight, freeze response, and switches into the parasympathetic. So by shaking, you are talking the language of the autonomic nervous system. That is the language, the embodied language, right? So yes, your cognition's important, but what you really want your cognition to do in a high stress situation is you want to have it so that it reminds you to speak the other language, which is your embodied language, which would be, for example, shaking it out. So the zebra does that. And what that actually does, and through research they found this, is that shaking with the zebra does is it kind of completes that survival stress. It shakes out all the things that it no longer needs, all the chemicals that have changed in the body that were great, like cortisol and everything else that was great for survival. You don't want that hanging around all the time, right? Then it becomes something that could harm you. So you're shaking it out. So that's the reason why just shaking out is a powerful exercise, because it engages your parasympathetic nervous system. I'll give you another example. Again, this is before I fully understood this. So I remember my son, when he was I got two sons, but the youngest of the two, when he was much younger, he competed quite a lot in gymnastics. That was his sport. That's what he loved doing. And I went to go watch one of the competitions, something I don't really enjoy. I'm not a very competitive person, but I went anyway because he asked me to. And I watched him just before he was going to go on to do his routines. And there he is on the edge of the mat, and he's like shaking out, shaking out, shaking out. And I watched him do that all day long. Later on, we're in the car, we're on the way home, in the motor vehicle on the way home, and I'm asking him questions. How did it go, buddy? And I said, you know what? I noticed you did something. It's really interesting. Every single time before you went on and did a routine, you were shaking out. You were like shaking yourself out. Like, what is that? Like, where did you get that from? He said, like, honestly, Dad, I don't know. Nobody taught me that. I just did it instinctively, and it just helped me to calm down. It helped me to relax. And that's always stood with me. Even like, 15 years later, it still stands with me. Why? Because I thought to myself, once I understood the reason behind it, right? Once I understood the kind of neurobiological reason for doing this. I was like, well, that's fascinating. Actually, you see children do that a lot instinctively. And as adults, we've forgotten that. So it's almost like there is a natural wisdom that we've always had. And somewhere along the line in the modern world, it gets taken away from us. But children do this naturally. That's why children who are struggling, for example, in school, fidget a lot. The reason they're fidgeting is because they don't know this consciously, but they're trying to get their parasympathetic nervous system to take control so that they can feel more relaxed, right? And then what do we tell these children? Sit still, don't move, right? When in actual fact, if I was the teacher and I saw that, that would be a really good time to do the zebra shake with that student, right? Or the whole class, right? It would be a perfect time to do it because it would bring that person back into the parasympathetic nervous system. It would help them feel more calm. And what happens when the parasympathetic nervous system is on? This is really important. You feel safe, right? The reason the sympathetic nervous system is running hot is because you don't feel safe. Now, that could be real, could be imaginary, but that's the reason why it's going on, right? That's why it's running hot. When you get the parasympathetic nervous system to engage, you are helping yourself feel safe. And that's very, very important. And although, yes, we are coaches, we are not therapists, the point is that we can have a very different experience with our clients if we can help them do what I've just described by getting them to come in, getting them to let go of the day of the week, get into a space where they do actually feel safe, and just trying to get your client to come to some level of calm, especially if they're stressed out, by telling them it's not going to work. Because that's like you telling yourself to calm down when you're stressed out. Remember, different language. You're not speaking the right language. You have to speak an embodied language. That's the key, right? So that's the reason why we did the shake. So when I move on now, and I'm only going to give you a couple of practices, because I want to make sure that when you leave the session, you go, okay, there were 2 things I took away from this that I can use straight away, right? And not have like all this stuff, you go, like, I'll never remember. So this move on. Okay, so I call this state shifting. This is my next practice, but it plays into everything I've been talking about, right? Is that we need to speak the language of the natural intelligence of our body. There's a few ways to do that, right? One way is through that physical engagement, as I explained. But there was something which is we're going to look at in year 2 that I didn't mention. I said right in the beginning when we did the zebra shake, I said, really focus on your exhale, like really make a point of focusing that you are fully exhaling as you do the exercise. Now, that's another part of the language. The breath tethers you to your autonomic nervous system. It does other things too. Of course, it keeps us alive, right? But the breath is incredibly important here. Now, one of the things, if we're talking about body state, and I've seen this so many times. Again, I'll give you an example. I was sitting a while ago in a conference room, and there was a meeting that was underway. And I'm watching everybody around the conference table. And what I notice is everybody is breathing from their sternum up. So there's these very short, shallow breaths that are going on. What does that tell me? The second I see that is that people are stressed, right? Because that's what happens when you are stressed out. When you are stressed out, you forget to breathe properly. You forget to take in enough oxygen, right? And this is where it can trip you up because that's going to have a knockoff effect. So although there's these 2 different languages going on, the beautiful part and sometimes a problem of the second language, the autonomic nervous system languages, that can definitely affect your brain state. That can affect your cognition in that moment of time. So it might not go this way down when you're telling yourself to relax, but it definitely goes this way up, right? So just seeing that, I can already see that this meeting is probably going to be quite tense. right? Unless something is done to change that in that moment. So unless somebody comes in, let's say the person in charge, and they seem super chilled, super relaxed, then everybody kind of downshifts, right? They're like, okay, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. He or she looks in a fantastic mood, right? But if that person comes in, they look stressed out, they look tense, their body posture says that, then everything is just going to rise up, right? And so it wasn't my meeting, I was just observing, but if it was my role in that moment in time, I literally would have got everybody to stand up and do the zebra shake if they liked it or not, right? I would have said, let's do this, right? Let's shake this out, because we need to come down. And unless we come down and we get to a calm state and we feel safe, we're not going to have the best meeting we possibly can. And we're not going to be able to get to the most important parts of what we need to discuss. So that out breath, specifically the out breath, this is the key, is the part that engages the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's not the in-breath that's doing that, it's the out-breath. So when you, like, even when, as I explain this next micro practice, there's different ways to help you engage that parasympathetic nervous system through your breathing, even if you are in a stress situation, right? Or even if your client, the person that you're coaching, is in a stress situation. There's a couple of tricks which I'm going to talk about. But I want to make this point again, is that by focusing on the exhale, that's the part that's the most important part about breathing. Now, absolutely, right? I'm sure you've seen it. Breathing is everywhere these days. There's all these different breathing protocols and courses and stuff that people can do. Nothing wrong with that. But actually, much of that you don't really even need to know or understand. And if you are imparting some ideas with your clients to help them manage their stress, they don't really need to know that. What they do need to know is they need to know that, we know this through research, that the out breath is the thing that engages the parasympathetic nervous system. We could say this the opposite way, right? If I'm breathing short, like shallow breaths, and I'm doing this, breathing like that, what that does is it switches on the sympathetic nervous system, right? So I'm a long-time martial artist, and that's what I was known for in a previous professional life. I taught all over the world martial arts or self-preservation skills, and my students included everyone from Tier 1 special force operators to special policing teams, to close protection groups, to airline cabin crew, to world combat athlete champions, to the everyday person, right? And one of the things that I would often have to engage in is sparring, where you're actually playing the game, right? Like, so you actually play fighting the other person. And if I ever felt that I was way too chilled and too relaxed, I would purposely change my breathing by making those short inhales to bring online my sympathetic nervous system to switch me on, right? Because remember I said earlier, it's not, we never want ourselves or our clients to see that, oh, the sympathetic nervous system is the bad guy, right? This is the thing we shouldn't be in. No, no, no. There are times when you need it, right? When you're feeling too flat, have no energy, you don't feel energized. One way to turn that around is by using short breaths. By just breathing short, you'll engage the sympathetic nervous system, which will start waking you up, bringing you back to life. And I used to do that in sparring all the time. Or when I was at university and you're sitting at a lecture and it's so boring and you're about to fall asleep, right? And you don't want everybody looking at you that you fell asleep in the lecture. I would use that breathing pattern to bring myself back to an awake state. And that's the great thing about the breathing part, is that nobody needs to know, right? It's something you can do undercover, right? And just, if I'm feeling stressed out, by just telling myself cognitively, okay, now's the moment to really focus on the exhale, right? Just by doing that, I'm bringing my body back to homeostasis. I'm starting to get myself back to a relaxed state, and nobody even needs to know, which is the fantastic thing about it. So on this micro practice, state shifting, the practice is to use your breath and gaze reset. I'm going to explain why that's important. If you want to give it a go, that would be awesome. So step one, if you notice as well, just the images that I chose is somebody sitting upright, feet are on the ground. That's important. right? Be grounded. Have your hands on your lap, right? So you can have it on your legs. If you want to, you can put it on your desk too. That works as well. Doesn't have to be on your lap, but it's nice to be in contact with your body. And you want to sit in this position, right? So not like this, right? Like all folded in, like sitting nicely, right? And you're going to look ahead of yourself and you're just going to soften your gaze. And what I mean by soften your gaze is you just kind of just soften your eyes. And so don't have them too wide open, just soften the gaze, right? You can look around gently. That's very effective. I said there, use a pencil if needed. So what do I mean by that, right? So if I take a pencil, one of the things what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to switch myself from a very centralized focused. I mentioned that earlier, right? When the sympathetic nervous system is running hot, you get very tunnel vision. You go into this tunnel. It's like a racehorse with blinkers. You don't see anything else except what's in front of you. And that's okay if I'm in a heightened threat situation. I want to be able to see the immediate threat. But in day-to-day life, if I'm in that too much, it's going to have a negative consequence to my health. And so what I want to do actually is I want to get my eyes to go into peripheral vision. I want to expand my vision outward. And sometimes I've noticed that when I work with clients, it can be quite hard for them to do that. So I just get a pen or a pencil to do that, right? So I go, okay, so stare at the pencil. So that is now your focus, right? That's when you're super focused. But as you start pushing out, I want you to switch your vision so that you're looking to the outside of that pencil. So now I'm looking on the outside. I'm not the pen. I can see the pen, of course, but it's not my central focus, right? I've kind of got my vision to expand. Right? And that's what I mean by expanding your gaze. Now, you might ask yourself, why? Why would we do that? Right? I've said it already. When your sympathetic nervous system is engaged, right? When you're in a high stress situation, your eyes are going to go into this field of vision that's directly in front of you. It's going to get centralized. That's where your focus is going to be. So the second you start expanding, you start getting into peripheral vision, right? Seeing the forest, not just the tree, that engages your parasympathetic nervous system. So there's two things there that three things we've already learned, right? If I can expand my vision, that's going to engage my parasympathetic nervous system, the calming side, right? If I focus on my exhale, that's going to engage my parasympathetic nervous system. And if I learn to shake out, that's also going to engage my parasympathetic nervous system. So you can, if you really, want to take it to that next level, you can take the exercise and bring all of them together, where you're shaking, breathing out, expanding your peripheral vision. Bring all of those three together. That's a pretty good triad, right? As far as really engaging that calming side of your nervous system. But in this particular exercise, you want to just sit. I do this one too sometimes, especially I use this one like if I don't have enough time between virtual sessions, because I find those virtual sessions are pretty taxing, cognitively, emotionally, right? Just physically. And so I could just sit at my desk when I do this, focus on the fact that I'm exhaling longer than I inhale. So my exhale must be as long as I possibly could get it. While I'm doing that, I'm softening my gaze. And while I'm softening my gaze, I am expanding my peripheral vision, right? And if the only way that you can do that is by moving your head side to side, or even your eyes side to side, that's fine too, right? I just got really used to being able to do it, even though I'm just sitting without moving my head, but it doesn't matter. As long as I'm expanding my peripheral vision, that's a powerful thing to be doing. And then the last step 3, which I kind of hinted to, is, feel your sit bones, uncross your ankles, don't sit with crossed legs, feel the ground between, the ground beneath your feet. Why? Well, because we saw that in that first image, right? That the way that individual was sitting. And oftentimes when we are defensive, one thing we do is we close up our body, right? We cross our feet, we turn ourselves slightly, we bring ourselves into kind of a more holding pattern. And the reason is because exactly that, we're trying to feel safe. And the goal is to let somebody be able to expand themselves out right? Be expanded and feel safe at the same time. And that's really the goal that at least I'm trying to do with my clients, because I'm always taking an embodied perspective, right? That's kind of the key for me. That is the huge thing that shifts the moment in time with that client. So I'm going to give you we still got time. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes just to do that while I take a drink of water, just kind of practice that maybe once or twice. Think about it afterwards. Like, how did that change? Did you feel anything different? That's important so that you can build that rapport with yourself. And there's also something that you can then bring to your clients when you actually work with them. I'm almost finished. Elena, do we have time? We're all right? We're all right for time?
14 minutes to go.
Okay, cool. Fantastic. Probably won't get 14 minutes, but probably less, but open to any questions. That would be great. So hopefully you had a bit of time to give that a go. So next thing I want to just kind of touch on here, I think this is important, right, is we talked a lot about client overwhelm, but also coach fatigue. We've mentioned that too, right? Depending on how many sessions you're doing a day, especially if you're going back to back with sessions, that can be extremely fatiguing. And the thing is that we don't often recognize, but I think it's a powerful place to kind of situate this, is that when our clients are dysregulated, and I'm sure if you're a coach and you've been coaching a while, it's not uncommon for a client to come to a session and be dysregulated, right? There's things happening. They need clarity. That's why they're talking to you. That's why you're their coach, right? They need you to help them find the answers to the situation they find themselves in. So it wouldn't be uncommon for them to be dysregulated. Your goal always is to look at them, see how they're holding themselves, posture, tone of voice, breathing. Notice how they're breathing. If they're breathing shallow, that's a great indicator that they are feeling dysregulated in that moment in time. These are all cues for you to hopefully step in and potentially change that, right? But the flip side is important here. We absorb that dysregulation, right? And many times we're not even conscious of it. So it's always interesting. Like, let's say I did 3 sessions today with clients. Sometimes I walk away from those sessions and I feel fantastic. I feel like on top of the world. Other times I do 3 sessions and I want to just go to sleep for the rest of the day. And I'm like, what's going on? And my realization a while ago was that, okay, well, this is exactly what's happening, is without realizing it, I am absorbing the energy of the client, right? So what I started to do is to exactly that, to be aware of how I'm engaging with my client in the session, be it in person or virtually. How am I holding myself, right? How am I breathing? So that I can be a much better coach in that moment in time, but also that I don't end up absorbing the client's dysregulation. So I've used this before. Again, it depends on, from coach to coach, but I don't necessarily do this on the first session. But as my clients get used to me, they get used to my way of doing things. It wouldn't be uncommon if I see that their dysregulation is going higher than I would like it to be. And I can notice it on how they're talking, how they're not able to communicate the way that I know that they can. I literally will like do a time in that moment in time. I'll go like this, and they know what that means. I call it the time in signal, right? And what I want to do there is a moment of co-regulation. And simply put, it's like, I think we need to just stop for a second. Let's just take a step back. Let's both of us just spend a little bit of time here just focusing on our breath, focusing on that exhale. Typically, my clients would have done this with me already, so they know what I'm talking about. And just spend a bit of time doing that. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be a minute, 2 minutes, nothing massive. I'm like, okay, now let's come back to where we were. Let's kind of start again. And I find that that's very, very effective. Of course, it requires confidence from you as the coach, right? Because you are coaching that person. You need to feel confident that you can insert that in that moment in time. Like I said, it depends on the coach, depends on your approach, your style of coaching. I'm very much a very practical, coach. So most of the clients really appreciate my way of doing things. The other thing that's very, very helpful is what I call name to tame, right? So naming overwhelm helps the system settle. Like literally checking in, not just with yourself, but with your client, right? Okay, things are changing here. I can see that you're getting stressed out. Let's name to tame, right? Let's talk about how you're feeling right now. Where are you feeling this? I feel a tightness in my chest. I feel the butterflies in my stomach. Just suddenly my hands became clammy. Just acknowledging that is really important, because again, in the modern society that we're in, we literally operate from here up, right? It's like this doesn't actually exist. It's just the vehicle that gets me from point A to point B. So many people come to me with no real embodied self-awareness of their body, how it responds, why it's doing what it's doing, and the changes, the state changes that are happening in that moment in time. And my goal is to get them to be able to become more self-aware, right? And so that's a really nice way to do it. And exactly as I said earlier, right? And I might say to my client, look, this sounds like a lot to hold right now. They've just said some things. Let's take a breath with that. Like, let's just take a breath and let's just recheck in with ourselves. And I just find that that is a very, very powerful way to shift the narrative in the moment towards the way that I want it to be. So, because I'm always wanting my clients, I'm always wanting to help them, and I want them to leave that session with like, okay, not only did I get some clarity, but I also felt a lot more calmer when I left the session. And that's me. That's what I have. As my saying goes, right? When in doubt, regulate yourself first. So even like when you're sitting there and you're not too sure what to say next in a session, check in, regulate yourself. Often is the way to move forward. Cool.
How wise is that, Rodney? Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. The way that I used to describe it to special force operators is a little bit more hardcore. Your inner state dictates your fate.
Yeah, I'll definitely remember that. Yeah. Thank you so much for,
absolutely,
for this insightful, really practical masterclass. We truly enjoyed it.
Right.
I wanted to use the opportunity to ask you a question.
Sure.
What would you, and this may sound really generic, but I would appreciate if you could just share what comes to mind as an answer. What will be your top tip to help regulate the nervous system of a 10-year-old who goes to busy school from 8 till 6? And when comes home, wants to have fun, like, just play a video game, and there is so little time left for speaking with your parents. Like, what's the first thing that you can recommend in that regard?
You need to model the behavior that you want your child to have. So one thing that I mentioned in the session is I've got 2 boys. They're adults now, but they will actually remember me doing all of these practices with them: the breathing, shaking out. Those are the things that you need to do. Model the behavior. Like, find moments when you can, as busy as it is, to say, hey buddy, let's just do this quickly. Are they going to fight you? Maybe. Are they going to think you're mad? Probably, right? But like down the road, it's so interesting because my youngest son is now in university. He's in his first year and he's getting to the end of the first year. It's pretty intense right now. And he's managing okay. And I just had a call with him last night and he was like, Dad, I can't tell you like all the things we used to do, you know, like the zebra shake and the breathing. Because once I knew, right, I made it a point of like, okay, the first people I'm going to give this to are my children, right? He's like, yeah, I do it all the time and it makes a big difference. On one thing you mentioned and I'm sure most parents are aware of this, and it's a very hard battle, and I understand that. But coming home and sitting in front of a TV game or an iPad or YouTube is not relaxing. All that really does is it fires up that sympathetic nervous system because it's giving dopamine hits, right? So actually, you might think that you're calming yourself down, but you're not really. So what I would do is I would like, okay, look, I don't have an issue. You can come home, you can play some games, whatever. But first, we're going out. And it could be a walk to the park. It could be just a little game that we play that's physical, that's movement-based, right? Because that's the sad part, right? I'm not sure how it is where you are in Bulgaria, but definitely in large part of the Western world is like recess is getting shorter. Play, like real old school playtime of being outside no longer exists, right? Yep. And the school thinks that they're educating people. Yep. You know, I know I have a PhD and all that kinds of stuff, but I got that later on in life. But I disliked school. I really did not like school at all because it didn't fit who I was. I was the kid that wanted to move, that, you know, loved my imagination, staring out the window, whatever. And I got reprimanded for being like that. I don't think that was very helpful. And all the teachers when I was growing up said to me, oh, the way you are and the way that, you know, you're so distracted all the time and all these things, you're never going to amount to anything. You're never going to go anywhere. Well, I'm sure they would like to eat their words now. So as I became an adult and I realized what's actually good for me, I proved all of them wrong, right? I did all the things that they said I couldn't do, and I did it really well. So I would really make a point of saying, look, I know it takes extra energies for parents too. You've got a long day, you've been working, you're tired as well. So see it as an opportunity for yourself. Like you actually engaging and practicing a nervous system reset by going out, playing football, whatever it is, kick a ball around, do something like that, right? I mean, something that your child would enjoy, but make it physical without, this is always my kind of caveat. And people ask me questions like this. I say, you know what? Whatever modern society says you should do to be successful, do the complete opposite. Pretty much most of the time, that's the best advice, right? So, you know, unhook yourself from gadgets, leave the phone at home, go for a walk without a destination. You know, it's okay to be bored, daydream, all these things. Look, all the research shows that what I'm saying is correct. And it's really an important part of just regulating yourself, but also flourishing. I mean, actually, many of us can acknowledge, if we're creatives, that our best creative ideas come out of moments of boredom. So if we didn't have moments of boredom, we wouldn't even have creative ideas. But now we have a situation where the kids have to be busy all the time, 24/7. I'm not sure that ultimately that's the way to go and that's going to be good for them. So I'm not sure if that helped you out, but that's my answer.
Thank you so much for sharing. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Cool.
Gemma, I see that you're with us. If you would like to share an observation or simply ask a question to Rodney, please feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, we got like 1 minute left.
Yes, exactly. Not sure if she can hear us.
Yeah, no problem. It's great. No, it's fine.
I hope you feel better, Gemma. And thank you.
Yeah, I haven't been well either. I can totally understand.
And thank you for sharing the feedback. Well, once more, Rodney, it's been a real pleasure hosting you today. There are so many key takeaways, which are so practical to implement. I'm genuinely excited about trying them actually right away.
Yeah, let me know how it goes. Let me know how it goes.
Sure, even this evening when I pick up my son from school.
Yeah.
So once more, thank you so much. Do take care.
My pleasure.
Stay
All right, thank you. Thanks, Elena. Bye.
Bye-bye.